The laughter cut sharp across the cafeteria, loud enough to turn heads, cruel enough to leave a sting. A boy shoved another tray across the table, tilting his chin toward the man in the corner. His voice carried for everyone to hear. "Look at that old jacket. My grandfather has rags newer than that." The others chuckled, emboldened by his mockery, eyes darting toward the figure seated alone. The man did not look up. He sat quietly, shoulders slightly stooped, a faded green jacket wrapped around him like armor. The elbows were frayed, the zipper crooked, and on the left shoulder, barely clinging to the fabric, was a patch sun-bleached and worn, its colors nearly erased by time. To the boys, it was nothing more than an excuse to sneer. To him, it was everything. Still, he didn't rise to defend himself. He simply lifted his spoon, steady though slow, and kept eating. Silence was his answer. Silence had always been his answer. Yet, unseen by the group of boys, a man at another table had noticed. His gaze fixed not on the fraying seams, nor on the wrinkles that creased the jacket's surface, but on the patch. His jaw tightened, his breath drew in short. That single patch, its faded insignia, spoke a story only a soldier could read. And the man who watched was no ordinary diner. He was a general. The boys' laughter grew, bouncing around the room. One mimicked the way the jacket sagged off narrow shoulders. Another snorted, saying the man looked like he'd crawled out of the trash. Their words built walls of cruelty, brick by brick, and still no one else spoke. People averted their eyes, stirred their coffee, turned the page of their newspapers. Bystanders became accomplices through silence. The man in the jacket had grown used to that. He felt the sting, yes, but he had carried worse, far worse. There had been a time when silence meant survival, when listening for the faint crack of a twig could mean the difference between life and death. Compared to that, the voices of mocking teenagers were mere whispers. And so, as always, he endured. His backstory lived in shadows, known to no one in that room. Years ago, he had carried the same jacket through mud, thick enough to pull a man under. He had slept in the rain, his chest pressed against cold earth, listening for distant fire. He had watched comrades fall, men who had shared bread with him, men who had joked about life after war, cut down in seconds. He had borne witness to sacrifice, to promises broken by fate. The patch, sewn to his shoulder by trembling hands, was the last link to a unit that had not come home whole. When he closed his eyes even now, he saw them. The desert wind lifting dust into his mouth, the stench of smoke and blood mingling in the air, the sound of a helicopter's rotors receding until there was only silence, a silence so complete it ached. He remembered carrying his friend's body across rough terrain, refusing to let it be left behind. He remembered the weight, not only of flesh and bone, but of a promise he had made under the stars. We all make it home. Not all of them did. But the jacket, the patch, it carried their memory. To discard it would be to discard them. So he wore it, no matter how faded, no matter how many snickers it drew from strangers. The general's eyes sharpened. He had seen men wear that insignia. He had commanded some of them, buried others. That patch was no decoration from a thrift store. It was earned through blood, and the man wearing it now, hunched but unbroken, was someone who carried a history far greater than these boys could ever imagine. But still, the mocking grew. One boy leaned close enough for the man to hear, his words dripping with disdain. "If you can't afford a new coat, old man, maybe beg outside instead of embarrassing yourself in here." The man paused. His spoon rested against the tray. He inhaled deeply through his nose, then released it, slow. His hands, scarred and weathered, did not tremble. His silence was unshakable. That silence itself became a wall no insult could breach. Yet the room felt heavier for it, because silence is not weakness. Silence at times is the loudest defiance of all. The general stood then. He moved deliberately, every step carrying authority, every line of his face carved with years of service. When he reached the man's table, the chatter around them faltered. Even the boys fell quiet, sensing a shift they couldn't yet name. He didn't look at them, his eyes fixed on the faded patch. And then slowly he raised his hand, not to mock, but to salute. The gesture was crisp, precise, filled with reverence. The room froze. The boy's smirk slipped. People who had looked away now turned back, shame coloring their cheeks. The man in the jacket, surprised, finally lifted his gaze. For the first time that morning, his eyes met another's. The general's expression carried no pity, no condescension, only respect. Respect that was unshakable, deep, and absolute. The boys glanced at each other, confused. One whispered, "Why is he saluting him?" Another muttered, "It's just a patch." But the general heard, and his voice, when he finally spoke, cut through the room with the weight of command. That patch is not just a piece of fabric. It represents men who stood where most of you would never dare to stand. It represents sacrifice, his and those who never came home. And you laugh at it. Silence stretched across the cafeteria. Chairs creaked as people shifted uncomfortably. The boys lowered their eyes, their bravado crumbling. The man in the jacket said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was his honor, his dignity. The general's words filled the space for him. The general turned to him again, and with a voice steady but softened, he said, "Men like you carried this nation on your shoulders. We salute you, because you never stopped carrying them, even when the world forgot." The man nodded once, a gesture small yet profound. His eyes glistened, though no tears fell. He had not sought recognition. He had not needed it. But in that moment, surrounded by strangers, he felt the quiet vindication of honor restored. Others rose from their seats. One by one, as if a current had swept through the room, they stood. Some placed hands over hearts. Others bowed their heads. A wave of respect spread, drowning the earlier cruelty. The boy's red face slunk back, their earlier bravado shattered beneath the weight of truth. And in the midst of it all, the man remained still. His silence had won, as it always had. He carried in that silence the voices of the fallen, the memories of brothers who would never walk into a cafeteria again. He carried their laughter, their courage, their last breaths. And through him, they were remembered. Later, as the room slowly returned to its rhythm, one line remained etched in every witness's memory. Honor does not fade with fabric. It lives in the lives once given, in the silence of those who endured. For the boys, the lesson would linger, etched deeper than their laughter. For the others, it was a reminder that dignity walks quietly, often unnoticed, until the world is forced to look. And for the man in the jacket, it was another day, another burden carried with grace. When he left, he did not walk taller. He did not bask in attention. He simply slipped into the cold air, jacket wrapped tight, patch pressed close to his shoulder. His silence followed him like a shadow, steady, unbreakable. And the general watched him go, knowing that some battles are fought without rifles, some victories claimed without a sound. The story lingers in reflection. In a world quick to judge by appearances, we forget the hidden wars carried by those beside us. We forget that the quiet man in the corner may have lived through storms we could not withstand. Respect is not owed to wealth or clothes, but to sacrifice unseen, to strength carried in silence. So to all who watch and listen, remember the man with the faded jacket. Remember that honor is not measured in fabric, but in the lives bound to it. Share where you stand, where you listen from, and what this story stirs in you. And if you too believe in honoring the silent heroes among us, stay and hear more stories of those who walk quietly, yet leave behind echoes that will never fade.